Have you ever wondered how Nintendo started off? Turns out they started as a modest company that made cards for gambling, known as Hanafuda.
In the early 1960s, Nintendo made Love Hotels, but then 3 years later, in 1963, Nintendo did taxi service from 1963 to 1968.
Nintendo started to make video games, and their first game console, the Game & Watch, was released on April 28, 1980, and the Game & Watch sold 43.4 million units, and this was how Nintendo started off their first video game business.
Nintendo made a deal with a company called Ikegami for a new game called Donkey Kong. Ikegami would make the hardware and Nintendo would make the stickers. After this, Nintendo got annoyed on how long it was taking to ship the consoles for Donkey Kong, so they decided to make over 80,000 illegally made copies of Donkey Kong, and that completely dwarfed the amount of legally made consoles. Nintendo also made a sequel to Donkey Kong known as Donkey Kong Jr., which used over 70% of the original Donkey Kong's ROM illegally. They were fined $14 million adjusted for inflation.
A few years later, after all the Donkey Kong madness, Nintendo made a new console called the NES, or called the Nintendo Entertainment System. One of their first games on the console was a more story-driven version of redesigned characters who used to be called Jumpman and originated from Donkey Kong. He was renamed to Mario, and his colors on his overalls and hats were swapped. They also added new characters such as Bowser, Princess Peach, and Luigi, and was called Super Mario Bros. And went on to be one of the most famous Nintendo games ever made.
Game Boy was introduced in 1989 and was Nintendo's first try at a handheld console and sold 118.69 million units/copies and was a really big hit, and it changed handheld video gaming as we know it. The Game Boy came in a bundle with the first version of Tetris. It was a very simple block stacking game, but many people loved it. One of the highest selling games for the Game Boy is the original Pokemon games known as Pokemon Red and Blue, or in Japan known as Pokemon Red and Green. This added a wonderful large amount of characters known as Pokemon, which is abbreviated from Pocket Monsters. You may know one of them as Pikachu, known as one of their greatest mascots, just like Mario.
In 1996, a few months after the first Pokemon game was released, Nintendo released a revolutionary piece of technology, the Nintendo 64. It was called the N64 because it had 64 bits and used 3D models. The same day the N64 was released, the first game came out, Mario 64. It became a critically acclaimed game due to people finally being able to see Mario in 3D. It went on to be very popular, not only because of how nostalgic it was to many, but also because of the uncomfortable feeling of loneliness it gave to people, and it became the subject of many analog horror series.
When the GameCube was released in the year 2001, it was revolutionary because of the fact that instead of using cartridges like the N64, the GameCube used discs, which made it much easier to store much more data onto one small package, and it made it easier for people to find the disc if they lost it. It was also easier for Nintendo to fit more data on it. One of the most successful games on the GameCube, which went on to become a full-fledged series with a bunch of beloved characters. The game was called Animal Crossing. Animal Crossing was a game loved by many. It had its fair share of controversies, but we'll save that for another time. Despite Animal Crossing being released on the GameCube, the original Japanese release was released on the N64, and it was known as Animal Forest, or in Japanese, Dobutsu no Mori, because it was released on the N64 as people had less interest in it. It was quickly ported into the GameCube to save sales. This was a worldwide release known as Animal Crossing. Many people love it to this day and has become a beloved franchise to this day.
DS was an innovative design created by Nintendo in 2004. Its main purpose was the fact that it had two screens. Therefore, one screen could show a menu of the game, while the other could show the game itself. This was very important for a game like Pokemon because of the entire items menu.
In 2006, the Wii was released and was one of the most special designs because of the games it had. It had many innovative and fun games and memes, and gave way to many lovable games and have been played to this day. In fact, just 2 years after the Wii was released, it became Nintendo's first console to be bought by 10 million Americans in just 1 year. The Wii also gave way to many interesting characters remembered to this very day. That's right, I'm talking about the Miis. These gave way to lots of content and interesting ideas, even making a burger into a Mii. Many people even recognized the little tunes from the Wii Sports when it started up, and it was great memories for many. The Wii even came with GameCube compatibility, which even allowed you to play many of the older games from the previous console. This unfortunately only came with the normal version of the Wii, and if you get the family version of the Wii, you're out of luck and don't have access to the backward compatibilities.
The Nintendo 3DS was pretty much just a better version of the DS. It had a 3D button, which allowed you to play as if you were watching a 3D movie in a theater. On this release came one of the newer versions of Animal Crossing New Leaf, which came with the player having more control over the town because they were mayor. And this introduced one of the most beloved Animal Crossing characters, Isabelle.
In 2012, the Wii U released and not many people liked it that much. It was regarded as one of Nintendo's biggest failures, and some people even confused if it was just an extension or a console itself, since it would connect to the Wii. However, 3 years later, something would come that would save the Wii U.
2015, while the Wii U was dying, Nintendo released a game called Splatoon. It was a third-person shooter where you could switch from being a squid and a kid. Many people loved it, and it saved the Wii U from dying. The franchise is still going strong to this day with 3 games and complex lore.
In 2017, Nintendo unveiled a new console, the Nintendo Switch. It was released with Mario Odyssey and Breath of the Wild. The Nintendo Switch, like its name, allows you to mix and match Joy-Cons and switch between playing on TV and in handheld mode. It came with a charging dock and a kickstand. It came with many online features and allowed people to play online together and had many digital games on the eShop.
In 2019, the Switch Lite was released. It was a Nintendo Switch with the main focus being handheld, similar to the Game Boy and the 3DS. It came at a cheaper price of $200, and it was meant to be on-the-go circumstances. Some people didn't want to pay $300 for it, so Nintendo made the Switch Lite cheaper than the original Nintendo Switch. Next section is about how Nintendo helped out indie game developers on making their games more widespread. Nintendo would put many games not licensed by them on their eShop. Big games or not, they were still supported and bought by many people. This shows how Nintendo helped out the indie game community a lot.
So what you've learned from this journey is that Nintendo has come a long way from gambling cards to taxis to games. Nintendo built up their company from scratch, and they are now a AAA company selling quality games. This just goes to show how Nintendo built up their company with a rocky start from getting sued, and yet they are still here today making quality games that people love and enjoy.